The legend speaks of the greatest king on the continent of Ares, a ruler surrounded by abnormal companions who continued to fight until the end. He was known as the Mad King, Mars. Before his death, he left behind strange final words, remembered as a refusal towards something unbearably disgusting. That is how the story is told. In the present, an attendant approaches and brings food close. Mars shows no appetite and dismisses her. This Mars is the prince of a small kingdom on the edge of the continent of Ares. As a prince, it would be natural to assume he lives on luxurious and carefully prepared meals. Instead, he is eating monster meat just to survive. He escaped the castle and now hunts and consumes monsters in the forest. It is not because the kingdom lacks food. As a prince, he had more than enough. The problem is that most of what awaited him in the castle was tainted with poison. The kingdom is steeped in corruption, ruled in practice by the tyrannical prime minister, Gamorus. For reasons of his own, Gamorus sees Mars as an obstacle and is determined to have him assassinated. Even after cooking it, the monster meat tastes awful. It is barely tolerable, but eating it is necessary if Mars wants to stay alive. He endures it, aware that this cannot be a temporary hardship, yet unable to see when it will end. Just as he is about to take another bite, a mysterious girl suddenly appears behind him. Her presence is abrupt, close enough to startle him. She makes her intent clear immediately, showing interest in taking him on as her pupil. Mars reacts by stepping back and drawing his sword. He had not sensed her approach at all, which immediately sets her apart. The girl indicates that he still has much to learn, while also recognizing a latent potential within him. She considers him worthy of inheriting her blade. Mars demands a reason for this judgment. The girl responds with a brief smile, pointing to the simple fact of what he is eating. The implication leaves him visibly confused, caught off guard by her reasoning and unsure how to respond. The girl explains that when a human eats monster meat, they can slowly absorb the strength of the monsters. The process is extremely gradual, but it is real. She adds that monster meat tastes terrible and is poisonous, which is why normal people would never choose to eat it. Mars listens in silence. He questions who this girl is and why she is suddenly explaining something like this to him. He responds by explaining that he vomited the first few times he ate it, but that the poison in monster meat is still less deadly than the meals that killed his poison tester. The girl reacts to this, taken aback by the mention of a poison tester being killed. Although it is an internal matter of the kingdom, Mars explains the situation to her. He reveals that he is a prince, that his mother is dead, and that his father, despite being king, refuses to protect him. Because of the struggle for the throne, he has become a constant target for assassination, and every meal served to him in the castle is now laced with poison. The girl asks if he is eating monster meat because he is fleeing from the poisoned food in the castle. She also reminds him that monster meat itself is poisonous. Mars answers that it is manageable once he gets used to it. It will not kill him, even if the taste remains unbearable. She shows no sympathy in response and simply ignores his complaint. The reaction comes across as rude, but it also steadies him more than he expects. The girl remarks that his ability to adapt like that makes him remarkable. At the same time, she points out that if he is still afraid of poison, then he still has a long way to go. She then throws an object toward Mars. He catches it, unsettled by its ominous appearance, and thanks her. He points out that she is giving something like this to someone she has only just met and questions why she would go so far. Mars then asks who she really is. The girl introduces herself as Cassandra. Mars repeats the name, and his eyes widen as realization sets in. He confirms the name again, recognizing it as the Red Demon Sword Cassandra. Cassandra acknowledges that people do call her that, though she makes it clear that she does not particularly like the title. The Red Demon, also known as the Beast, is a warrior consumed by battle. She is a famed sword saint who has defeated dragons and even evil gods. Knowing this, Mars smiles faintly, realizing that receiving a ring from someone like her must mean it is a powerful magic item. He also understands that if Cassandra truly accepts him as her pupil, the threat of assassination would no longer loom over him. With that expectation, he puts the ring on. Only then does Cassandra reveal that the ring is cursed, a tool that afflicts its wearer with poison. The shift in Mars's expression is immediate. She explains that this is his first test under her guidance, a trial to prove that he can overcome the poison inflicted by the ring. A sudden sensation tightens his throat. His body reacts before he can fully understand what is happening, and the feeling convinces him that death may be close. Cassandra steps toward him, making it clear that relying on items to deal with something as simple as poison is unacceptable. She expects him to conquer the poison on his own. According to her, poison resistance is learned by defeating poison itself. She makes it clear that the ring cannot be removed unless he overcomes its curse, and if he fails, he will die. Ordinary people would perish quickly, but because Mars has been eating monster meat, he should be able to endure it. Mars comes to a blunt realization. Cassandra is dangerous. As a first lesson, she has forced him to wear a poisonous item, even though he has spent his life trying to avoid poison altogether. The irony is impossible to miss. Inside the castle, an elderly man examines Mars and admits that the poison cannot be healed. Even cure magic proves ineffective. Mars lingers between life and death for 3 days and 3 nights. One by one, the doctors give up on trying to save him. Rumors spread throughout the castle that the prince has finally succumbed to poison. In the end, Mars survives. The people around him celebrate his recovery. No one questions the fact that he was poisoned yet again. His father reminds him that protecting himself is his own responsibility, a remark that feels cold given the circumstances, even if this time the poisoning was truly of Mars's own making. After recovering, Mars tastes the food served to him. He expects the familiar danger, certain it is poisoned. Nothing happens. His body does not react. He feels no sickness at all. At that moment, Mars understands. The poison no longer affects him. He has conquered it. Mars returns to eating normal food. He understands that gaining poison resistance was not easy, but the result makes survival far more manageable. One night, he goes into the forest and informs Cassandra that he has conquered the poison. She accepts the result calmly, having expected it. With this, deadly poison is no longer something he needs to fear. Mars expresses his gratitude to her. Cassandra then places something on the ground and tells him she is giving it to him. They are bracelets enchanted with gravity magic, designed to double his weight when worn. At that moment, Mars begins to suspect that his training is far from over, and that Cassandra's methods are consistently pushing him toward danger. She asks whether he is still eating monster meat. Mars answers that he has not done so for a week. Now that poison is no longer a concern, he believes there is no longer a reason to continue eating it, and he questions whether stopping was a mistake. Without responding directly, Cassandra walks away and tells him to wait. When she returns, she brings the corpse of a monster. She throws a piece of its meat toward Mars and instructs him to eat it. The creature is a great basilisk, a rare monster. She explains that if he truly conquered the poison of the ring, then he should be able to handle this as well. The meat is raw. Mars asks if it can be cooked first. Cassandra refuses, stating that cooking it would reduce its effectiveness. Left with no alternative, Mars eats the meat. His body reacts immediately, and he nearly vomits, sensing that this could easily kill him. Cassandra presses him to swallow it completely. After forcing it down, Mars collapses to his knees. He asks whether the meat itself is poisonous. Cassandra confirms it without hesitation. She explains that the stronger the monster, the more poisonous its meat is to humans. As an example, she notes that dragon meat would be lethally toxic. The great basilisk's flesh, she judges, is the most Mars can handle at his current level. She adds that even a single lick of it would be enough to kill hundreds of ordinary adults. Mars comes to understand that Cassandra is dangerously unhinged, yet he forces that realization aside. He assumes the training for the day is over. Instead, Cassandra orders him to finish all of the remaining meat. Mars objects, judging the amount excessive by any standard. Cassandra challenges that hesitation, pressing him on whether he believes he is already strong enough and no longer needs monster meat. She urges him to test that belief by attacking her with the sword in his hands. Mars is caught off guard when she does not even draw her own weapon. It feels as though she is looking down on him. He charges at her and attacks with everything he has. Cassandra responds with a single kick. The impact sends Mars flying. She approaches him calmly and makes it clear that he is still weak and still needs to eat more monster meat. She forces the meat against his mouth, leaving him no choice. It takes time, but Mars eats all of it. Tears stream down his face as he does. From that point on, the training does not stop. Days pass with Mars repeatedly eating monster meat and learning swordsmanship under Cassandra's guidance. Although they only meet once a week, she watches him closely and immediately notices whether his growth is fast enough. If Mars tries to cheat by avoiding monster meat, she forces it down his throat. If he does not take the training seriously, she beats him without restraint. Before long, his training shifts into constant combat alongside consuming monsters. Even so, Cassandra does not allow him to fight recklessly. She carefully selects monsters that he can barely defeat on his own. No matter how strong the enemies are, Cassandra herself remains far beyond them all. As the training progresses, Cassandra notices steady improvement. She pushes Mars to challenge her directly and attempt to kill her. Cassandra controls her strength precisely, holding back just enough to avoid killing him. Her movements are so fast that Mars's body cannot keep up, leaving him repeatedly overwhelmed. 3 years pass in this relentless routine. By then, Cassandra acknowledges that Mars is beginning to grasp it. Through countless near-death encounters, Mars develops the ability to sense presences and evade attacks. It is not refinement that drives this growth, but pure survival instinct, shaped by the constant need to avoid Cassandra's blows. In the end, Mars's 3 years under Cassandra amount to nothing but relentless torture. Compared to facing her or battling powerful monsters, dealing with assassins in the castle now feels trivial. Then one day, Cassandra allows him to face a massive wyvern as it dives down from the sky. In a single exchange, Mars cuts the creature apart. The fight ends almost as soon as it begins. Cassandra acknowledges the result with approval. Even if a wyvern is weaker than a true dragon, it is still a formidable monster, and Mars has brought it down cleanly. She recognizes that he has grown strong. She also notices that he has become accustomed to eating monster meat. Mars confirms that he eats it every day. Cassandra notes that growing stronger is what matters. Mars agrees. She smiles. She then tells him that there is nothing left for her to teach. She reminds him to continue training on his own and warns him that if he slacks off, she will kill him for real the next time they meet. That is all she says before leaving. Only afterward does Mars realize that he never once asked where she lived. It becomes clear that Cassandra is a wanderer, traveling the world in search of strong opponents. Staying in one kingdom for 3 years was likely unusual for her. Even so, Mars has no doubt that she would return without hesitation if he were to abandon his training. He is grateful for what he endured. He is stronger now, but he understands that strength alone is never enough. The fragile path he clung to in order to escape assassins led him straight through hell. Mars does not yet know how meeting Cassandra will ultimately shape his life. But to survive the assassins sent by Gemelas, to stand against powerful monsters, and above all, to avoid being killed by his own master, he has only one option. He must keep eating monster meat. Some time had passed since Cassandra disappeared. Mars continued to be targeted by assassins. Another struck that day, and Mars killed it cleanly. It became the 10th assassin that month. The frequency unsettled him. If this continued, even the assassin industry would face a shortage of workers. Gamera, as always, remained relentless in her pursuit of his life. Gamera's plan was already in motion. She forced Mars's father into marrying her daughter, intending to produce a son. Through that child, she would claim the right to the throne. For that to happen, Mars had to be removed. His existence alone stood in the way. Cassandra, the Red Demon, had somehow become Mars's mentor. Her guidance came wrapped in violence. Her training pushed him to the edge of death again and again. She ordered him to keep eating monster meat, to keep strengthening his body. She warned him plainly that if he grew lazy before their next meeting, she would kill him herself. The lesson was simple and absolute. Mars had no choice but to grow stronger if he wanted to survive. Nearby, Mars noticed a group of men sparring. One stood alone against 4 others. He stopped to watch. It struck him as unusual. Fallon had known more than 200 years of peace. Without war, practical combat training had nearly vanished. Swordsmanship was treated as obsolete, unnecessary in an age of stability. Many even dismissed it as something barbarians relied on. Sword duels were outright prohibited. Those who still trained seriously were labeled dangerous or insane. Such people were not admired. They were watched, judged, and often imprisoned. That was the accepted order of things. Mars stepped forward and approached the group. He asked calmly if he could join them. One man immediately questioned who he was. Another assumed he must be a noble's child. They told him to leave if he did not want to get killed. One of them sneered, convinced Mars was looking down on them, trying to toy with them for his own amusement. Mars quickly realized that the men disliked nobles. Their suspicion was open and unhidden. One of them, seeming to grasp Mars's intent, allowed him to train with them anyway. He gave a blunt warning. If Mars died, there would be no complaints. The man charged first. His name was Agma. The moment he closed the distance, Mars struck. Agma was sent flying, his body thrown aside as if weightless. Mars looked at him calmly and remarked that he was still alive. Under normal circumstances, an assassin would have been split in half by that blow. The rest attacked at once. There was no hesitation and no order. A few moments later, the fight was over. The men were lined up on their knees. Mars stood before them and spoke evenly. From that day on, they would serve as his training partners, once every 7 days. He stated the reason plainly. As they had just witnessed, he was stronger than all 5 of them combined. One man shouted his refusal. He accused Mars of killing time, of using them as entertainment. He said they already struggled to secure meals each day. His anger sharpened as he spoke. That kind of hardship, he said, was something a noble would never understand. Someone who ate well every day could not know hunger. He demanded to know what Mars would eat that night. Mars answered without hesitation. Red bone meat. The man froze, confused. Agma spoke instead. He pointed out that red bone meat came from monster. A red bone was not something a single person like Mars could defeat alone. Another man accused Mars of lying. Everyone knew monster meat was poisonous. That was common knowledge. Mars replied calmly that calling him a liar was ignorance. He told them to look behind them. A massive blood bear stood there. Panic spread instantly. Screams broke out as the weight of the creature's presence crushed the air around them. Mars briefly judged whether the blood bear would be suitable for tomorrow's meal. The decision was made in an instant. He moved forward and cut off its head. The massive body collapsed without another sound. Agma stared in disbelief. Mars showed them what he meant by proof. He cut into the meat and ate it in front of them. Then he urged Agma to try it as well. He warned him to take only a small bite. If he swallowed too much at once, he would likely die. Agma did as instructed and took a small bite. His body rejected it immediately. He nearly vomited, unaccustomed to monster meat. Agma had been born the 3rd son of a noble. His family valued manners and appearances over skill with the sword. He had always hated that life. To him, a sword existed for one purpose alone, to grow stronger. Society labeled him a disgrace among nobles, while others mocked him as a fool wasting his effort. To escape that suffocating judgment, Agma hid his identity and gathered like-minded companions. Together, they formed a group called 100. It was an organization devoted solely to power. Within 100, power determined everything. Rank was decided by strength alone. The title of one belonged to the strongest member. The group had grown to more than 20 members. They took pride in calling themselves the strongest force in the country. They even claimed superiority over the knights, whom they dismissed as ceremonial and hollow. Now, a seeker of far greater power stood before them. Mars urged Agma to continue eating monster meat. After Agma finished, Mars told him it was still too early for blood bear meat. He explained that Agma first needed to adapt by eating weaker local monsters, such as killer rabbits. Agma reflected in silence. In the end, their confidence had been nothing more than self-deception. They lacked true power, true resolve, and true understanding. Yet they had called themselves seekers of power. He bowed deeply before Mars. He said that Mars deserved the title of number 0, the one beyond the strongest. He declared that 100 would accept his guidance and asked Mars to join them and teach them. Mars repeated the unfamiliar title aloud. Number 0. Agma formally bestowed the name upon him. He added that Mars should also take a new name. Mars was too conspicuous. 0 suited him perfectly. Mars concealed his appearance behind armor he had found in an ancient room. Under its protection, he began training with everyone in 100, allowing him to fight with full strength. His ability to face groups improved dramatically. Each sparring session sharpened his skill, his reflexes, and his strategy. Yet, no matter how many times Mars defeated the members of 100, they always rose again. They pressed him to fight until they collapsed from exhaustion. Not even the assassins sent to kill him had shown such relentless enthusiasm. The determination was unusual, but Mars found it satisfying. In that way, a year passed. The training continued without pause. It was productive, yet Mars sensed it was taking an unexpected turn. Every member of the group now ate monster meat. The hierarchy had shifted. Those who could consume stronger monsters were celebrated, while those limited to weaker monsters were labeled weaklings. Mars disagreed quietly. A person's worth was not measured by the meat they could eat. Still, he could not deny the respect he received. Even as a prince, he had never been treated with such acknowledgement. The recognition was unfamiliar, and it stirred mixed feelings within him. Meanwhile, far from Hundred's training grounds, in the headquarters of the Black Knights of Falun, Commander Chrome spoke sharply. He questioned whether it was possible that a group spent their days eating monster meat and training relentlessly. One of his knights confirmed the rumor. It was true. The group called itself 100, and, astonishingly, some of their members had formerly been participants in the Black Knights. Chrome's expression hardened, shock giving way to tension. Other civilians saw it as a relief that the group was hunting monsters, easing the burden on those already stretched thin by the most dangerous threats. Commander Chrome, however, viewed the situation with caution. The act of eating monster meat and drinking its blood suggested the possibility of ties to a sinister cult, and he could not ignore the chance that some participants were his own subordinates. Determined to uncover the truth, he resolved to personally investigate the 100 and their activities. If they sought to spread chaos within the country, the Black Knights would confront them directly. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, another member of the 100 prepared to guide a newcomer through the process of hunting monsters, advising patience and restraint. The man with a mohawk instructed the novices to consume monster meat gradually, emphasizing careful progression. Observing from distance, Chrome noted how different the scene was from what he had imagined. The organization's openness was puzzling, and he could not discern who belonged or why anyone could join. The mohawk-haired member turned his attention to Chrome, acknowledging his swordsmanship and suggesting he could immediately enter the 100's ranking battle. He explained the group's golden rule: eating monster meat. Strength alone was insufficient. Refusal to consume it marked a lack of resolve. He handed Chrome a piece of the meat, pressing him to try it. Though warned it might taste unpleasant, Chrome understood that enduring it would enhance his physical strength. Reluctantly, he accepted and took a bite, thinking that, having come this far, it was a necessary step forward. Chrome struggled as he bit into the monster meat, nearly gagging. The man with the mohawk laughed, recalling that he had started the same way. Chrome, wary, considered that this person might know his true identity and could be trying to poison him. The thought only strengthened his suspicion that the 100 were tied to something dark. He resolved that, once he had proof, he would take them down. A year passed. Chrome's body had grown more muscular, and he acknowledged the transformative power of monster meat. His strength had increased, and his body felt invigorated. Every night, the 100 hunted monsters consumed their meat and engaged in real duels among comrades until one fell. Chrome, who had once questioned his own sanity, now found the pursuit of pure strength intensely compelling. He thought often of a man named Zeros, the top of the 100. Zeros had mastered legendary skills, Sonic Blade and Magic Barrier, once said to belong only to the hero who founded the country. Beyond that, he generously shared his knowledge with those seeking power. Chrome admired how Zeros offered guidance without holding back, wondering how one could possess such a divine spirit. In this environment, Chrome realized that attempting to subjugate the 100 would be sacrilege. Here, among the hunters and warriors, he found his true purpose. Meanwhile, in the castle, Mars walked the hallways. Rumors of the 100 had begun to circulate. Some called them barbarians. Others praised them as allies of the common people who helped subjugate monsters. Opinions were divided. Unlike life as a prince, constantly under threat, Mars found himself quietly admiring the freedom and strength associated with the 100. In the throne room, Mars was asked if he knew about this group. Reports described a violent, chaotic organization, killing each other and eating monster meat. Mars acknowledged that the group seemed formidable and asked who had brought him this information. Gamera stepped forward, revealing that he was the one orchestrating Mars's path to the throne and implying a direct threat to his life. Gamera told Mars that his track record as a prince had been poor and offered a suggestion. He proposed that Mars subjugate the 100, explaining that victory would secure recognition of Mars as the rightful successor to the throne, both at home and abroad. Fortunately, Mars possessed exceptional sword skills, and Gamera insisted there was no one better suited to deal with the so-called bandits. Mars considered the proposal carefully. He recognized that the 100 was gaining the support of the people, and attacking them could erode his own backing. He suspected that Gamera was framing this as a form of revenge, using even Mars's father to enforce his plan. When asked if he could carry out the task, Mars acknowledged the request, humbly accepting it, though his mind raced with the question of how he should proceed. As he walked through the hallway, Mars reflected on Gamera's intentions. He knew the scheme was designed to place him in a compromising position, yet he refused to be manipulated. The challenge was how to resolve the situation without losing control. Nearby, a girl sat in a chair, drawing Mars's attention. She spoke, noting that it had been a long time since they last met. Mars, cautious, wondered who she was and why she had entered the room without permission. His instincts braced for danger, suspecting she might be a new assassin, though he noted she carried a distinguished aura that suggested otherwise. The girl addressed Mars directly, asking if he was willing to lend her his power given his position. Then, in a quiet but clear voice, she called him Zeros. Mars froze. How could she know his secret identity? Mars remained confused, uncertain how she knew him. Frau noted that she had expected him to forget and casually reminded him that she was his fiancée. Recognition flickered across Mars's face as he realized he did, in fact, have a fiancée. He apologized for not remembering sooner and questioned what she meant by calling him Zeros. Though Mars was the leader of 100 Zeros, he had long hidden his identity as a prince. It had been years since he last saw Frau, making it seem impossible for her to know his current situation. Frau revealed that she had been watching over him all this time through a crest. The mark allowed her to share his vision and appear at his side at will. Mars stared at the mark on his wrist, stunned. Recalling their childhood, he remembered a strange spell Frau had cast on him as a child, one that had looked like a birthmark. At the time, he had found it interesting and ignored it. Now he understood that she had been monitoring him for years through that mark, and the realization of her capabilities made her dangerous. Frau had first met Mars when she was 8, introduced by her father as his fiancée. Despite his status as a prince, he had seemed ordinary aside from his fine clothing, and she had not taken much interest. At that age, she had just learned a new pack mark spell and had used him as a test subject. The spell succeeded, leaving her satisfied. By the time Mars was 11, he had nearly died from poison. Frau, curious about the poison, used the contract for the first time in years. Around that period, Mars began to behave unusually, consuming monster meat. The development intrigued her, as she began to use the pact mark more frequently. Through her observations, she saw the prince's magical power steadily increasing. Fascinated, she decided to follow his example and consume monster meat herself. From that point on, she never grew bored of monitoring Prince Mars. Mars recognized the weight of the problem. His private life had been under Frau's constant surveillance, yet he pushed the thought aside. He asked her what she had meant by lending her power, but Frau deferred the explanation, insisting they would discuss it later. Meanwhile, at Hundred's base, the presence of Chrome and Warren drew attention. It was still difficult to believe that the two leaders of the 4 Knight Orders of the Red and Black Kingdoms had joined Hundred. In Falun, 4 Knight Orders existed. The White Knights protected the king and the highest nobles. The Blue Knights guarded the royal capital, and the Red and Black Knights handled expeditions and monster subjugation during wartime. Zeros sensed the tension in the room. Ogma approached and relayed urgent news. The country was attempting to annihilate Hundred. Chrome, commander of the Black Knights, and Warren, commander of the Red Knights, had been assigned to this task. Zeros processed the information quickly and decided that for now, they would leave the country to handle the matter. Warren addressed the group, confirming that both he and Chrome, along with the Red and Black Knight Orders, had committed to supporting Hundred completely, deferring entirely to Zeros' decisions. Zeros paused, questioning the phrase until the end. Chrome explained that justice no longer existed in the country. If the Red and Black Knights joined Hundred, their combined strength would be sufficient, provided Zeros led them, giving them a real chance to succeed in the rebellion. Zeros understood that they had no intention of retreating. The revelation of their willingness to betray their own country and spark civil war weighed heavily on him. Rebellion was not something he wanted to be involved in. He would rather escape to another country and live freely than participate in such turmoil. Still, Zeros knew the truth would change everything. He revealed his true face, and astonishment rippled through the room. They recognized him as Prince Mars, the hidden leader of Hundred. Mars allowed a small smile. Now, everyone understood that, as the Prince of Falun, he could not simply rebel against his own country. Chrome finally understood what Zeros had meant. He addressed Prince Mars, confirming that he had received Mars's transmitted thoughts. Chrome explained that Mars did not desire a rebellion, but a legitimate war. It would not be a rebellion. With conviction, Chrome declared that it would be a just battle for Prince Mars to claim his position as successor, with justice on their side. Mars reflected quietly that, whether he held the title of prince or not. Initiating a rebellion against his country was still wrong. One member pointed out that Prince Mars had been preparing for this for many years, gathering and strengthening 100 for the eventual conflict. Mars thought silently that he had never organized forces for rebellion. He had only brought more people together, and somehow the 100 now numbered over 1,000. He knew he needed to calm them and make them understand reality. He reminded them that even with an army, the royal castle was impenetrable, and questioned whether they truly had any chance of winning against the kingdom. Footsteps approached, and Mars was informed that it was not just the white and blue knights. There was also the magic division. Frau revealed that they would be allies of Prince Mars. Mars was taken aback by her arrival. Chrome laughed, noting that Mars need not test them. Frau had already briefed them on everything. Some members of 100 might not yet know, but Frau, nicknamed Frau, Empress of Thunder, was the central force of the magic division and a key figure in the country's defense. Frau confirmed she would lead the magic division. The men erupted in approval, confident that victory was now assured. Mars felt a quiet confusion. He had known Frau would lend her strength, but he had not expected such open support. It seemed they were preparing to fight rather than flee. The story was moving toward a rebellion against his own country, and he struggled to grasp how it had escalated so quickly. He asked Frau why she was helping them so much. Even though their engagement had been decided by their parents, he questioned whether it was truly worth taking such a dangerous path just for that. Frau admitted that her actions until now had not been proper for a fiancé. From this point forward, she would act as one in earnest. Her rise to the title of Empress of Thunder had come from following Mars's example, consuming monster meat to increase her magical power. Though she had once been indifferent to him, she now felt she could not even consider breaking their engagement. A life constantly on the edge of death fascinated her. She told Mars that she wished to continue watching over him and expressed that she was glad to have him as her fiancé. One of the members shouted in excitement, declaring that victory was now assured. With the commander of the Black Knights, Chrome, the commander of the Red Knights, Warren, Frau, Empress of Thunder, Ogma, and all of 100 at his side, along with their leader Zeros, Prince Mars, they were prepared to strike against the corrupt nobles. Mars looked on, realizing he could not intervene. The group was formidable, seemingly unbreakable, and ready to push forward with a rebellion against the country. Despite the high chance of success, Mars felt the direction of events pressing him toward a path he had not chosen. The story was moving toward a conflict he had never sought, and he silently questioned when he had ever desired the throne at all. Chrome declared their readiness to risk everything for Mars, affirming the prince as the rightful heir to the Falun kingdom. Around them, the others cried out in the name of justice, determined to see the rebellion through. Mars reflected on the orders he had received to destroy the 100. At that moment, he had only two paths, to flee or to rebel. There was no way back. He had never intended to ignite a rebellion, nor did he seek the throne. Survival alone had been his concern. Having lived in isolation for so long, Mars now faced the weight of the people's trust. Their support pressed down on him, and refusing it was no longer an option. Frau recognized Mars as a threat to the kingdom. Yet, despite this, she could not tear her gaze away. She pledged to fight alongside him and to ensure the rebellion succeeded. The day to confront the 100 finally arrived. A knight standing behind, Mars observed his tension and asked if he was nervous, noting that this was his first real battle. The knight advised him to leave the fighting to the commanders of the Black and Red Knight orders. Mars' role, they emphasized, was to defeat Zero, the leader of the 100. Failure, they warned, would carry severe consequences. The White Knights, composed of noble children and essentially friends of Gamera's, were unlikely allies. They were poised to betray Mars rather than protect him, pushing him toward a confrontation with Zero in the hope that he would fall. Chrome and Warren approached, asking if Mars was ready to advance. Chrome requested a moment alone with the prince before the battle began. The commander knight instructed them to wait. The prince was not to be addressed directly. There was no reason for him to personally engage with the 100 beyond his critical task. The commander of the White Knights froze in surprise as the Black and Red Knights arrived in full force. The 100, mere commoners pretending to be knights, could not be treated as equals. Their so-called order of chivalry had fallen into disgrace. Mars observed Chrome and Warren, their enthusiasm clear, and felt his resolve harden. Stepping forward, he addressed all his troops, declaring that the enemy was already within the capital. The White Knight reacted with shock, questioning what he meant. Mars revealed the target, the 100. Without hesitation, Mars executed a sword strike. The members of the 100 stared in amazement. The blow was precise, controlled, and perfectly executed, leaving no doubt of his skill. Turning to another White Knight, Mars stated that, regardless of the battle's outcome, the knight had intended to kill him. The knight froze, stunned that Mars had discerned the truth. Chrome swiftly decapitated him, confirming Mars' assessment. One remaining White Knight pleaded for his life, insisting he would never dare to assassinate Mars. He explained that they had only followed the deputy commander's orders. Chrome's gaze hardened. He called the knight pathetic, questioning how such men could protect the kingdom, and warned that as long as they lived, true peace was impossible. With that, Chrome ended him, and the rest of the White Knights were cut down. With the threat eliminated, Chrome declared the White Knights tarnished and urged Mars to move forward. Together, they would deliver true justice to the corrupt kingdom. Mars acknowledged Chrome's loyalty, finding it deeply reassuring, though the intensity in his gaze was difficult to meet. Warren warned Mars that they were likely being watched. Mars acknowledged it calmly, noting that from this point onward, it would be a race against time. He urged them to move quickly toward the royal capital. At the city gates, a White Knight announced the prince's arrival and moved to seal the gates. Before they could act, Sir Bled of the Blue Knights struck the White Knight down, commanding that the gates be opened. The Blue Knights pledged themselves to Mars, reaffirming their loyalty. Mars recognized Sir Bled and commended his work. Sir Bled explained that the Blue Knights were responsible for maintaining order in the capital, but now they were fully committed to supporting their prince. As they entered the city, the 100 clashed with the remaining White Knights. One White Knight caught sight of Ogma and mocked him, claiming it was time to witness true swordsmanship. Ogma challenged that notion, insisting the 100 would show what real skill looked like. As Ogma struck, his movements precise and lethal, he emphasized that combat was not about display. It was about survival. True strength, he stated, was measured by defeating the enemy decisively, proving that high ideals alone could not shield them. Brute force alone could not end violence, and anyone who thought otherwise would be proven wrong. A White Knight acknowledged the truth. The 100 were nothing more than thugs. Mars observed silently, noting how accurate that assessment was, though the reality carried a weight of sadness. Another White Knight warned that the 100 had the mage core on their side, and once the mages joined, the fighting would become far more dangerous. At the mage tower, Frau's father called urgently. He reported that Mars had begun a rebellion and emphasized the seriousness of the situation. Frau interrupted, requesting that her father step down and transfer the family title to her. Her father reacted with confusion, questioning her request. He explained that he was not old enough to retire and reminded her that a woman could not inherit the family leadership. Frau began preparing a spell. Her father demanded to know her intent, but she moved forward without hesitation. She unleashed a powerful lightning spell aimed at the other mages, declaring the start of a rebellion. She explained the sequence of her attack. First a shock, followed by lightning. If that was survived, an explosion would follow, and finally, if one endured that, dissolution would come. The mages pleaded with her to stop, but she remained resolute. Frau turned once more to her father, begging him to surrender the family title to her. She pleaded that he grant her this one wish. Outside, one of Mars' allies noticed the delay in the mage corps' arrival and asked if something was wrong, speculating that Frau might have intervened. At that moment, Gamers appeared, calling out to Prince Mars. He remarked on the unexpected turn of events, Mars now leading a rebellion. Then, declaring the prince's path to the throne over in his name, Gamers announced that Mars' life was forfeit. A group of figures stepped forward, blocking Mars' advance, warning him to prepare for the fight ahead. The party announced their intent to end Mars' life. His father stepped forward, and Mars met his gaze, recalling that he had never investigated his mother's death. He suspected his father only cared about his own safety, indifferent to who would survive. A mage unleashed a gravity spell on Mars. He remained calm. Gamers explained that the spell should immobilize him, and that his sudden rebellion had been anticipated. A-rank adventurers had been hired, and reinforcements would soon close in, ending Mars' resistance. Mars, however, wore the gravity bracelet given by Cassandra. He simply walked past the spell. One adventurer, bewildered, questioned how the gravity had failed. Mars explained that it was functioning as expected. He was just accustomed to it. Suddenly, an explosion erupted from above. An adventurer identified it as the power of a poison lizard, warning Mars that paralysis would follow. Mars recognized the creature, recalling the taste of its meat and dismissing it as disgusting. The adventurer recoiled, incredulous that Mars had eaten pure poison. Another adventurer charged, convinced Mars was bluffing. Mars met the attack with a single precise strike. The adventurers watched in shock as their ally was cut in half. One member asked the healer if the fallen could be revived, but she explained that only a necromancer could restore him. Mars apologized quietly, noting that it had been some time since he fought without the bracelet, and he had briefly lost control. Daggers flew toward him from the remaining party members. The party member called to Mika to prepare an attack spell, Luida to provide support, and Chad to create a distraction. Unfazed, he struck an approaching adventurer with a sonic blade. The impact was instantaneous. The target was bisected. Another member demanded healing, but the healer replied that only a saint could restore him. Angered, the party launched a coordinated assault with blazing crimson flames. One declared that Mars' fire should be met with fire. Mars braced, admitting he could not block the attack, but a magic barrier intercepted the flames. The party froze. The mage collapsed to her knees, astonished, admitting it had been her strongest spell. A magic barrier of that strength, she realized, was only possible from a high-level monster. Mars smiled, quietly savoring the shock on their faces. He had mastered his current skill through repeated encounters with the demon ape, perfecting it after consuming its meat. As he advanced, he told the party to step aside. He had no intention of killing them. The party leader stepped in to block him. Mars suggested he run, promising to spare him. The leader, anger flaring, refused to be mocked. He questioned whether Mars truly believed they would retreat after their comrades had been killed. Declaring himself an A-rank adventurer, he launched a sword strike. Mars blocked it instantly. After several exchanges of sword strikes, Mars recognized that the party leader was a skilled swordsman, someone capable of keeping up with him. He then chose to end the exchange with a single, powerful kick. The blow sent the party leader crashing into the wall. He stared in disbelief, unable to accept that such force came from nothing more than a kick. He questioned whether Mars was truly a swordsman or a monk. Mars explained that his master had always fought that way, and he had simply followed the same approach. Turning his attention to Gamera's, Mars noted that he was the only one remaining. Gamera's composure faltered, anxiety and fear evident. Gamera's reflected on how it had come to this. He had poured his heart and soul into the kingdom, believing that every choice he made was for the people. 15 years earlier, the kingdom had been in chaos, with the former queen at its center. To save the country, Gamera's had persuaded the king to carry out a coup. From that moment on, he worked relentlessly alongside the nobles, slowly rebuilding the nation while keeping constant watch over them. Everything he did was for the kingdom and its people. He believed that only by accepting both the good and the bad could such a fragile system be maintained. Even so, Prince Mars had always stood in the way of that vision. Gamera's knew that sooner or later the nobles would try to use Mars as a political pawn. To prevent that future, he decided Mars had to be eliminated, despite his innocence. Poisons, traps, and assassins were all deployed. Yet Mars survived every attempt, without protection or allies. Nearby, Agma shouted that the nobles had all been crushed, declaring that Gamera's was the only one left. Mars was taken aback by the news. If the 100 had truly wiped out every noble, he wondered how the kingdom could possibly be governed. Gamera's, meanwhile, questioned whether Prince Mars was also Zero. He wondered if Mars had built his own faction in secret, and whether he had been preparing for this moment all along. Mars, watching the aftermath, realized that the 100 could not rule a kingdom. He considered that it might be better for his father to remain on the throne. Mars turned his attention to his father and raised the matter of the throne. His father, visibly shaken, insisted that it belonged to Mars. Mars then asked whether there was anyone capable of handling the kingdom's governance. Gamera's reacted in disbelief. Mars called him forward and placed him in charge of the kingdom's affairs, leaving Gamera's stunned by the decision. In the days that followed, order returned to the kingdom far faster than expected. Mars' wedding was held without delay, with Frau as his bride. She had earned the people's trust through her bravery during the Civil War. Even so, She spoke of attempting a summoning ritual involving human sacrifices, causing Mars to quietly question whether she was truly suited to be queen. Agma and the others repeatedly lectured Mars about entrusting authority to Gamaras. Agma, furious, reminded him that Gamaras had attempted to assassinate him and was responsible for much of the chaos. Chrome also questioned whether Mars truly intended to leave the kingdom in Gamera's hands. The question followed naturally: who would handle the kingdom's politics? The 100 were driven by the belief that only the strongest deserved authority. Under that mindset, there was no realistic way for Mars to govern directly. From that point on, Gamaras worked without rest. He devoted himself entirely to stabilizing the kingdom and managing its affairs. Gamaras later declared that Mars was a king among kings, pledging his life in service and vowing to carry out his duties without fail. After some time, the coronation was held. Chrome formally proclaimed the rise of the new ruler, naming Mars as king. The people hailed King Mars, expressing hopes that his reign would bring peace and prosperity. The 100 pledged to follow Zero wherever he would lead. Mars had only wanted to survive, yet his path of eating monster meat and enduring constant danger had led him to the throne. How King Mars would begin rebuilding the kingdom, and what awaited him beyond that, remained unknown.